morning.
Good morning.
I want to start with to say thank you to the congregation and also to the elders for allowing me this opportunity. And to Lima, those songs were great, and the singing was very good this morning. If that didn't motivate you, I don't know possibly what in the world could. So thanks, brother. Appreciate that. I'm also going to give a quick plug out to the teenage class. If you have not met the young people that we currently have in this congregation, you are missing out. They're phenomenal. They ask a lot of great questions. If you get a chance, maybe talk to them before they leave today. So this morning, the lesson topic is to hunger and to thirst. So I teach a lot about lessons, things that have happened to me, things that I consider things that perhaps happened in my life. And so I'd like to share some of that with you this morning. So the story is a story of a holiday dinner. I don't know how things were done in your house when you were young, but in my house, we lived about 80 miles from where my grandparents lived. And so it was normally a Sunday morning. We would get up. There would be the mad rush, the yelling of orders, brush your teeth, comb your hair, hurry up, we have to go. And of course, there's three of us, a brother and a sister and myself, and we were never in a big hurry at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So this crazy rush of activity, there was usually not breakfast. It was, hey, just get in the car, we'll figure it out later. So we'd get in the car, and it's an 80-mile drive. Of course, 80-mile drive, we have 3 in the back, and not a lot to do, so the father would often threaten, hey, if you don't stop that, I'm going to stop the car. We had a lot of this that happened. I'm resonating with you, you understand. There was no stopping for snacks or drinks. If you didn't have it in your hand when you got in the car, you were not going to get it. That was not going to happen. We did not know what a bathroom break was. That was not happening. But the whole time, all we could think about was what was to come. What were we going to do? Who were we going to see? Who was going to be in the house when we got there? And it was one of those things, it was always kind of a delayed reaction because we would get to my grandparents' house and everybody's already walking out because we have to go to church. So the caravan of cars would go to the church, and all through church you're trying not to talk to your cousin and get in trouble or get pinched by your grandmother and all these things, and then finally that's over, right? So we get back to the house, but you know the minute that you open that door, the smell, right, that's going to hit you. All that food that is being cooked for days, all the things that you're trying to do and think about. You know they're going to turn on a football game or a parade. You know that they're going to go upstairs to the game room and they're going to play games with each other. So we knew that all this stuff was going to happen. So you would wait and you would see, and it would be loud and it would be kind of crazy. And for some reason, it always took an hour to 2 hours after church before we would even get to eat. I never knew why. All I could do is I could just grab something and go, but that was always heavily guarded by my grandmother. You did not steal food before it was time. She would hit you with a spoon. It was not good. She was very deadly. So all these things would happen. So, but the point would come where the plates are laid, the silverware is out, the glasses are filled with that good, I was from Tennessee, so that southern sweet tea. It's more sugar than tea, but it's amazing. And so we would have that laid out. And everybody would come from all over the house, and we would stand around the table, and my grandfather would deliver the prayer. And that man could pray. And it would take him a little while. You knew you were there for several minutes. And so finally, all through the prayer, by the end of that prayer, I won't lie, you're thinking about what you're about to put on your plate, because you can smell it, you're standing there. But the minute he said amen, you've never heard silverware hit porcelain dishes so hard in your entire life. And so that's what they would do. And so you would get your plate and you would go sit down, and you're so excited. You've got your sweet tea, you have your plate. The spoon hits, and you know the minute that it touches your mouth, all's going to be right in the world. Everything is going to be okay. So it's amazing how hunger and thirst and anticipation of a meal have impacted so many lives. People from all generations have been impacted by these urges. If you'll please turn with me to Genesis 25, we'll talk about a case where someone's meal got in the way of something that they wanted. So in Genesis 25, we find the story of Jacob and Esau. And if you're familiar with that story, you know that these were two very different young men. So it's a story that may mimic families today to have two very different brothers or siblings, but they're in competition for some of the same items. So Genesis 25, we'll start in verse 26, and I'm going to read some of that for us. And after that, there came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel. So this is Jacob. And his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field. And Jacob was a plain man that dwelled in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because he did eat of his venison. But Rebekah loved Jacob. And Jacob saw pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I'm faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, Sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die. And what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, Swear to me this day. And he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So on the one side we have Esau. Esau was older, but just barely. Jacob tried to go past him as they were being born. He was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, so this is a guy that spent a lot of time outside. He would hunt, he was a man of the land. And his father Isaac loved him, truly loved him, because of his venison, because he was giving him that good offering. And it's funny that the venison that Isaac loved is the same meat that, when you think about the story of Cain and Abel, right, they wanted that meat of the field, right? That was what smelled good. On the other side there we have Jacob. He's described as a plain man. He dwelled in tents. I had an older preacher tell me one time that this young man must have been kind of softer, maybe, than Esau. Maybe Esau was a little more what they would say like as a man's man, and maybe Esau was kind of more around his mother more. But his mother Rebekah loved him. So we have two different brothers that are loved maybe in two different ways. But Jacob could cook. He could cook some pottage, some stew. So the story says that Esau came in from the field and he was faint. And as I read this the other day, I read it 2 or 3 times, and I realized for Jacob to come in faint, he had to have been out doing some serious stuff. He had to have been out there a while. He had to have been hungry and thirsty. And he asked Jacob to feed him. Jacob, always looking to maybe be an usurper to get past, he says, Sell me your birthright. Give me what is yours. Give me that. And Esau said, Well, I'm fixing to die, so hey, what good is my birthright? If I die, I won't be around to have that birthright. So Jacob pushed him again, right? He says, Swear to me this day. And Esau swore to him, and he sold him his birthright. In that instant, something that was very, very precious was cheaply sold. So I realized I needed to kind of understand what this birthright really means. I mean, we kind of talk about our firstborn today, and what do we give our family and inheritance and stuff, and I think we kind of get that. But so I went and I looked this up, and it says the birthright is the right to be recognized as the firstborn. It is the right. It refers to position and inheritance. And here's what the firstborn son inherited. He inherited leadership of the family. So not only did he get all the other things that would normally come with the firstborn, he's the boss. He is the leader. And judicial authority of the father, so of Isaac. So he is the one that's able to say, no, you cannot do, or no, you must sell things this way, or no, this is how we deal. So that is great authority that he would get. And the Bible kind of goes into that because not all families are created equal. So please turn, if you don't mind, to Deuteronomy 21. And I want to share something, verses 15 to 17. So Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 15 through 17. And it says, if a man has 2 wives, so remember back in those days that they would have had more than one wife. One is beloved and the other hated. So the husband likes the one, but maybe doesn't so much like the other. And they both have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated. And if the firstborn son be hers that was hated. So he doesn't like this wife. Then it shall be when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. So the father could not just choose, well, I like your mom more, so you get to be the firstborn. It was from whichever one was first. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength, the right of the firstborn is his. So bottom line, that firstborn son got it all. He got a double portion, the judicial authority of the father, and he was also the leader of the family. So when Esau gave up his birthright, that's what he did. So he sold his birthright for a bowl. Our next example, if you would please, let's turn to Luke 16, verse 19. Luke 16, verse 19 is a story of two men. It will also be a story of brothers rather. But this is a story of Lazarus and the rich man. It's one that many of you may have heard in your time in the church or with others. But it tells the story of a rich man and a beggar. I'd like to read you some of that. So starting in verse 19 of chapter 16. It says, "There was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in the flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest the good things, and likewise Lazarus the evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And beside all of this, between us and you there was a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from hence." So let's go back to verse 19. So we have the story of two very different people. You have a man, a rich man. He is richly dressed. He has money. He has means, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's what he has. But it says something very interesting, that he fared sumptuously every day. So I looked it up. What does sumptuously mean? Sumptuous is defined as something that is splendid, expensive looking. So it has that perceived thing. It is grand. Some other words they use to demonstrate sumptuous would be lavish, luxurious, deluxe, opulent, magnificent, resplendent. I had to look that one up too, but we'll talk about that one another time. Gorgeous, grand, extravagant, lush, princely, rich, costly, bottom line, impressive. So not only was he eating well, this was a grand spectacle. This was a lot. And he didn't do this every once in a while. He did it every single day. Every day, this is how he dined. But then in verse 20, we talk about a beggar. And that beggar wanted the crumbs from his table. Just the crumbs. So I don't know about you all, if you've ever been to the movies, right? So when you go to the movies, you normally you get your drink, you get your popcorn, you sit down and you eat the popcorn. For some reason, the popcorn does not all go into your mouth. A lot of times it gets all over your shirt and your pants and whatever else. When you stand up, do you ever see how much stuff actually falls to the ground? Popcorn is messy. It's going to go all over the place. This is all that Lazarus was looking for. He was looking for those crumbs. He laid at the gate full of sores, and desirous of the crumbs which fell from the table of the rich man, and the dogs licked his sores. So he had no nurse, no help, nobody was cleaning him up. In some ways, when I was reading this, it was almost kind of like it's very similar to the Good Samaritan, where the man was lame and nobody would really kind of take care of him. So he's there, they see him, he's at the gate, he's right there, they can see him. But still, no one actually goes and takes care of him. There's no one to look for him. But in the end, the beggar came out better than the rich man. An old preacher told me one time, he said, it's always interesting who they name in the Bible, because they say that on Judgment Day the books will be opened and the names of those that will be read. And what is interesting is they say the name of Lazarus, but they never give us the name of the rich man. There is no name for him. So there's things to think about. So when Lazarus died, the angels took him to Abraham's bosom. The rich man dies, and it was specific. He was buried. And he was in hell or Hades, in torment. And he looks and he sees Lazarus in Abraham's bosom. I would bet you he was craving to be somewhere else other than where he was at that point. So when the rich man cries for mercy, send Lazarus for one drop to put on my tongue, to cool my tongue. Could you imagine being that hot, that thirsty, where that one drop would make that big of a difference to how you felt? Just that one small bit of relief. But what did the rich man do to provide relief to Lazarus in life? Much like Esau, I think the rich man gave, or realized too late through his actions, that he gave away something extremely precious and went away. The rich man's plea also to have Lazarus go to his father's house. So if you look at verse 28, verse 27, he says, Then I said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come to this place of torment. So he realizes someone needs to help my family. They have to go tell them. But Abraham said unto him, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And he said, Nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said unto him, If they will not hear, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. So if they don't believe and hear what's in front of them, they're not going to listen to someone else. It's quite a lesson. Do you think that in life the rich man ever thought to ask anything of Lazarus? Maybe how he was doing? Do you think he walked by him? Do you think he saw him? Do you think he did anything to help him? I wonder if he thought, did Lazarus have anything to offer? Did he? I don't know. But that's something that we have to think about, right, when we deal with people. What do we do? So like Jacob and Esau, what is our choice? What do we look at? How do we see? What do we think about? But that rich man would have given anything for that one drop of water to be on his tongue. So the question then arises, what do we hunger for? What do we, right? What do we thirst for? So earlier we read Luke 11, 9 through 10. I would like to read that again, if I may. Luke 11, 9 through 10 says, And I say unto you, ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh, receiveth. And he that seeketh, findeth, and to him that knocketh, it shall be opened. So in verse 9, you find action words. You find the word ask, seek, find, knock, which means we have to do something. We can't just sit around and hope that things come to us. We hunger and thirst for what we have to go after and get. Are we asking? Are we seeking? Do we know what it is when we find it? Do we study? John 6:32, it tells us what we should be seeking. So we will turn to John. So John 6:32 reads, Then Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life unto the world. Then they said unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. John 4 reiterates some of this. We find a woman at the well. And she's talking to Jesus. She's not the most popular person. She's a Samaritan. And as you may know from study, the Jews and the Samaritans, they didn't really intermix or mingle. They didn't come together a lot. So John 4, verse 13, here's what it says. And Jesus answered and said unto her, he's talking to the woman at the well, Whosoever drinketh this water shall thirst again. So what's in there? They're at Jacob's well that Jacob dug. But whosoever drinketh of the water I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. And the woman said unto him, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. And Jesus said, Go and call thy husband and come. But the story is that she had 5 husbands, and the man that she was currently with was not her husband. So Jesus, to her, was like a prophet. How do you know this, Jesus? And so he talks to her about that. And Jesus says in verse 21, he says, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true believer shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeks such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship must worship him in spirit and in truth. And so she goes away. He sends her away. to go and get the others. And in verse 39 of that chapter, here's what it says. And many of the Samaritans of the city believed on him, for the saying of the woman which testified, he told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans come unto him, they besought him that he would tarry with them for 2 days. So he stayed there with them for 2 days, and many believed. So they knew what they needed to look for something. The woman realized there's something I should be looking for. This is the water that I need, not the water from the well. And I'm not telling you not to eat food or to drink water to live. That's not what I mean. Just the thing that we should seek and look for is more than that. So if you'll turn me please to Psalms 143. This is David. Psalm 143, starting in verse 1. And he says, I cried unto the Lord with my voice. With my voice unto the Lord did I make my supplication. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed him my trouble. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then thou knewest my path. And the way wherein I have walked, they privily laid a snare for me. I looked on my right hand, and behold, and beheld, but there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. No man cared for my soul. I cried unto thee, O Lord. I said, Thou art my refuge and my portion, and the land of the living. Attend unto my cry, for I am brought very low. Sorry, that was 142. And then 143, if you please, move to verse 6. It says, I stretch forth my hands unto thee. My soul thirsteth after thee as a thirsty land. Have you ever watered your grass when it was just dry as a bone and dusty? The water just goes in, it just falls into the cracks. It gets hard to go in there, but that land needs something. And within a few days of watering, the grass tends to green back up. It gets better. But could you imagine being in a place that your body's craving that so bad, that thirst for God, that it's like a dry land? So in closing, who are we to be like? Are we to be like Esau when we grow up, when we grow faint? Do we give up too soon? Do we stop before we're ready? Are we like the rich man, not knowing what it means to hunger and to thirst until it is far too late? Or are we like David? Do we pour our hearts to God? Do we pray to him? Do we beg to him? Do we seek for him? Do we yearn to have our thirst satisfied? It may be that you've not been baptized, but that is something we can absolutely help you with this morning. We're absolutely ready to fill up this baptistry. We can immerse you. If you're not quite ready but want to learn more, we have folks in the congregation that are more than willing to help you, to study with you, to spend time with you, to teach you that, to show you God's word, and to share with you the hope that we have. And perhaps you're in need of prayers this morning. We have men that are willing to come forward and pray for you, for your needs, and whatever they may be. Please come forward as together we stand and sing.
And I know that in